Good day to you. I'd like to introduce you to an ex-student of mine who's now a Facebook friend. And she's speaking to her Facebook friends. I'd like you to see what she has to say because she's inviting participation.
Hi, good morning. I put a hat on because I need a shower. But I was like, I can't wait. I have to tell you what's going on. So, I've been talking about these travel regimes for the month of June because that's what's been low battery. Okay, I gotta be quick. um, Travel regimes. So little itty bitty 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 travel regimes, which is pretty awesome. Um, Except I don't know if corporate come July 1st is going to take them off the shelf. They haven't said anything yet. Sometimes they say until they're gone, they're gone. I'm pretty bummed out because Soothe is already gone. And Soothe is my favorite to have on vacation. Because step 2 and 3 but make my sunburn feel better than anything I've ever done before. Like even aloe, it's better than aloe. And if you are like me and your skin gets burnt in the summer sometimes because you forget to reapply, or you go to a place like Hawaii and you get sunburn just because the sun touches your body, even if you have sunblock on, Soothe really helps with that. So anyway, I just want to hop on here, and you can get regular size Soothe, which I highly.
Okay, so you get the idea. She's selling some products here on Facebook. Here's some of the reactions from people. I don't know if you can read those. See you today. Hey, GM Jess, you look so pretty. Hi Don, love the hat. And then she also comes back, Jess is her name, Jessica. See what products are recommended for your specific skincare needs. All right, so this person, Jessica, she's like many people on the web, aspiring to be influencers over, in this particular case, beauty product purchases, but really overall seeking participation from the people that she's in contact with on social media, seeking participation in the form of purchases, comments, likes, shares, etc. So that's what we're taking on today. We're taking on the idea that social media is or is not participatory culture. And I think what you find yourself in this chapter is really a big argument that takes place. It's why you have a 300 level class like this, because in a class like this, you want to have original research being used to construct arguments, and that's certainly what the author Christian Fuchs does. He uses current research to construct a narrative, and I hope you're staying with that reading and really forcing yourself to concentrate on the very detailed and sophisticated arguments that he's making. A lot of them are challenging. A lot of them are challenging to our very own ideology of capitalism. But that's the intention of the book. And it's a bias on his part, and we can critique that as well. But it doesn't mean that we should write off his criticism because it's getting too close to the core of the system that we've grown up with. At any rate, the argument that's going on in this book is between him and an author named Jenkins and a respondent to Jenkins, who we'll talk about later in the video instruction lecture. So let's just start off by saying that participatory culture is something that's not new or unique to social media, but social media have accelerated it. It's accelerated the way that people are now today able to interact with the content and change the content. There's a name for that. We call it prosuming the content. That's when the consumer also is able to participate in the production of the content. Like when you take somebody's meme and you share it with somebody else, you're participating in the production, well, the distribution of the content, I should say in this case, but you can also participate in the production of the content if you doctor the photo in any way, which is easily possible on the web. So prosuming is a central term that we're talking about today. And I really like the quote that's early on in this chapter by Clay Shirky, who's a media scholar. Clay Shirky says that social media result in the writing of humanity. Social media result in the writing of humanity. I like that because it really speaks to the idea that social media have a very positive role in modern society. Whereas in the past, what did we look at when we tried to look at how human beings were being recorded so that we could study human beings in future ages? We looked at news reports on TV news. We looked at books that authors had written. We looked at newspaper stories. In some cases, we looked at video archives and personal video recordings on the part of people. But that's not what quite we're dealing with social media. With social media, we have average individual people each and every day, like Jessica Wilson, documenting she's in her house, what she's doing. She's an ordinary person. And that's what social media are allowing today. It's allowing us really to see humanity, not as it's produced by a big media company like NBC or Fox, but as it's produced by us, the people. And yet this chapter really questions what it really is all about, is questioning whether social media can actually make society more democratic and whether social media can actually be participatory. And yeah, this author is very, very skeptical, as I'm sure you can see. Let's get to participation. That's the central concept in this idea of participatory culture, which is what we're expecting to take a look at with social media. Participation in and of itself is the idea that consumers play a role in spreading the content. Think about that. Consumers play a role in spreading the content. Likes, shares, retweets, repostings, everything that you do on social media that takes the content that you have access to and then you share it with somebody else. You let somebody else know about it, even if that includes just telling somebody in person about it. You're participating in the spread of that content. Not that this didn't happen before with other forms of media. You can get a newspaper article that you really like and pass it on to somebody else. You can tell somebody about a TV show. But participation in and of itself involves the consumer, the audience member, spreading the content. And as such, it makes the consumer part of the product's success. You have a vested interest in this product's success. These friends of Jessica Wilson, they're purchasing that product and they don't want it to go away. They want it to keep being produced because it's popular, even though Jessica said corporate may take it off the shelves. They're starting to get involved in that model, right? They start to see that part of the success of that product is going to be due to what they are doing as well. So consumers become part of that process. It's interesting. They get co-opted, if you know that word. You get sucked into a company's overall money-making model. You don't even realize it. It's like when you wear a t-shirt that says Adidas on it. You're advertising for free for a company. Think about that. Why shouldn't Adidas be paying you? Really, you're advertising for free. And if you were a movie star, you would be paid by Adidas. All right, so let's go on now to participatory culture. We took on participation. Let's go into participatory culture. In participatory culture in social media, you have consumers interacting with each other, not just with the source of the media content, but with each other. And you see that all the time when huge dialogues get going on Facebook. It can break out into a completely different discussion. You know, I belong to a national organization for our profession called the NCA, or National Communication Organization. It's having a complete meltdown right now like I've never seen. It's all about a discussion that started out with the way that distinguished scholars, are chosen. That's a certain title at the organization. And it all started out with almost all of them have been white and male. So it started out like that. But then once the membership took over, and there are 1,500 members in NCA, and I tell you, a lot of them are commenting on Facebook, it went into completely different directions about fairness to Latinos, fairness to LGBT, fairness to races, fairnesses to ethnicities. And it's all broken down into a completely different area. And that's because the consumer started to, in this case, the readers of the Post started to interact with each other, and they actually formed pressure groups now to try and get the organization to change. So yeah, this is a big part of participatory culture, is consumers are not just interacting with the message coming from Jessica or whoever, but they are interacting with each other. And then Jenkins is brought into the discussion, really the first point at this point. He outlines a number of factors in his book called Spreading. What's the name of that book? I haven't read it myself. It's called Spreadable Media. Spreadable Media. In his book, which is the basis of the theoretical argument that goes on in this whole entire chapter, in his book, he says that there are low barriers to artistic expression when you have full-fledged participation on social media, low barriers to artistic expression. And that's just one of the many factors that he says has to be present in order for there to be participatory culture. But I want to highlight this one because when you think about the kinds of artistic expression that you do on social media, what are you doing? Are you really sitting down and drawing something? Are you creating something from your own colors that you see in your head when you're doing a meme, when you're photoshopping a photo, when you're doing a snap Snap Video, are you really selecting from your own original and completely open ideas, or are you selecting pre-made emojis? Are you selecting filters that are already existing? Are you sending memes that somebody else has created? That's what we're talking about here. There's really a low barrier. It's not like people expect you, if you're going to put anything on the internet, to be really, really good at what you're doing. You don't have to be, because there's a very low barrier to artistic expression. That makes a medium participatory and makes its culture participatory as well. Let's go on to the next idea now, which is the idea of participatory democracy. And is social media, or are social media really contributing to more democracy? That's what they were heralded as being able to do, that since each and every person can post something on YouTube and can rally others into a flash mob, or who can get others to like something so many times that it then gets on the algorithms for search engines. You have all that in theory, but does that really result? As you find out, it doesn't take long to get into this chapter, not very deep, before you find out this author is very skeptical about social media being able to accommodate democratic ideals. The idea of a participatory democracy is that social media should be helping to extend democracy to all parts of society, parts where democracy does not exist. And almost half the voting population who is eligible to vote in the United States does not vote in a presidential election. That's pretty astounding. That's not democracy working when you only have just over 50% of your population voting. So somehow social media has to be bring that out. Is social media driving people to the polls? And there's a lot of evidence that actually social media turned people off because of the huge fights that occurred, especially over Donald Trump, amongst family members, and the defriending that happened across Facebook, I know for sure. And is social media helping democracy in that way? Also, Fuchs critiques Jenkins' idea of participatory democracy, because he says that Jenkins really focuses his whole explanation on whether social media are participatory by just looking at culture. And if all culture can participate in social media, then social media are participatory. But that's not what Fuchs is saying. Fuchs is saying, hold on, you got to look at whether people are well-rounded individuals as well, as whether social media are promoting us to become well-rounded, or whether they're promoting us to become narcissistic, for example, or single-minded, or closed off to being able to communicate with people in person at all. It's not a well-rounded person if you can only live on your phone. You can only exist when you're looking at a screen, when you're communicating with others. And then there's also the continuing critique of capitalism that goes on, remembering that we have an economic structure where social media are money makers. We talked about big data in the last chapter, about how those data are being mined every single day to leverage your activity on social media into purchases. And so this is a critique of participatory democracy as well. All right, next up is the concept of political reductionism. Political reductionism, and this is really the critique part of the chapter, because the author Fuchs is starting to get into Jenkins' work. And he says that Jenkins ignores ownership when it comes to social media. And you can't ignore ownership when you're trying to figure out whether social media have a participatory culture, because the ownership is mostly corporate. It's mostly corporate, and the platforms that people communicate on social media are corporate platforms. And you don't need me to tell you that Facebook controls what you put, or YouTube controls what you put out there, or even Twitter, which is a fairly free medium. There are censorship mechanisms and control to stop you from fully saying what you want to do. And even the way that we choose to express ourselves, as I've already established, is according to a lot of corporate symbols. The thumbs up, for example. You didn't hand draw that thumb. You've chosen one that Facebook, the big blue thumb that is put on there. So corporate platforms really mediate our expression. That's a great saying that the author writes in this chapter, that corporate platforms mediate our expressions. We're not just unfiltered when we're speaking on social media. We're following the programmatic and formulaic structure of capitalism. And so he's also a critique of this idea that media are participatory or not as participatory as we think, is the idea that when you're going to want to do a full-fledged theoretical critical theory, you need to account not just for culture, but you need to account for economy politics, and culture. Economy, politics, and culture. These three things together make up the backbone of Fuchs' entire theoretical framework that follows him throughout the book, his critical theory, as we've established in the beginning. And he's saying that Jenkins, in his book, Spreadable Media, is only looking at culture. One of the concepts that Fuchs brings up is Marx's concept. Karl Marx is probably his leading thinker. Marx's concept of fetish thinking, which I thought is interesting here. Fetish, the same word that we use to talk about sexually and, dominatrix type sexual fantasies. It's not used in that sense here. Fetish is used to describe Marx's concept that our social circumstances that are undesirable are treated as things in social media and not as events that can be changed. Our social circumstances are treated as things. So think about an unfortunate circumstance. I'll give you one. If I walk down to 2nd Street in Stroudsburg, I can see a lot of crack houses. I know that for a fact because I know people who have lived over there. There's a lot of houses, a lot of poor people there, a lot of people who have been in and out of prison, and a lot of students living over there. Now, I would say it's unfortunate, is it not, that anybody should have to live in a crack house? I don't know, maybe you don't agree with that, but I would say that that's unfortunate. And so the question is that treated, the idea of a crack house, when it is taken a photograph of and then put into a meme, does it become a thing? Do social media sort of make that permanent? That idea that a crack house is going to be a permanent part of our society by turning it into a funny meme or by turning it into an iconic image? Or do we see that crack house as an event, an unfortunate event where people feel that they have to turn to drugs, and because of their prior backgrounds are not able to have a good chance at getting jobs, and the people they're living around are also doing a lot of drugs? Is that a different way of looking at it? That's an event, right, that can be changed somehow through education down there, or economic development, or more policing. I don't know what the answer is, but I'm just saying it's a different idea than the idea that the social circumstances being portrayed as a thing that cannot be changed. Also, as part of this idea, this what he's calling political reductionism, that's reducing everything to culture, even though he uses the word politics there, and not looking at the big picture, and ownership being the window into the bigger picture for our author here, Fuchs. He says that let's not forget that in the world of social media, you have capitalization and concentration. That's what capitalism encourages. Only a few companies are owning the big cross-section of traffic flow of social media messages going across the Facebook, the Twitter. There's just a few players. The Vines, they've gone away. Yeah, those smaller ones, they've gone away. And most of the money is concentrated with YouTube, is concentrated with Google. The advertising money is not being spent on individual websites. It's concentrated with these big companies who have agendas to make money. That's their bottom line. And let's just finish with the thought that brings it all home. I love this idea. It's that social media culture is a culture industry. Social media culture is a culture industry, and nowhere is this more obvious than the influencers. This is a whole role of a person that has emerged in your generation, an influencer. We didn't have that as a name of a person, as a name of a star-studded status person. And all the people on the cosmetic side of this who have run into controversies because they've made one post or there's a meme from their past. It's been recirculated and doctored, and they've lost followers or gained followers. That all speaks to this, that social media culture is an industry, that each and every day when you go on social media, you are producing, you are manufacturing, oftentimes for other people because you are prosuming, you are manufacturing stuff that is in some way money-making. Yeah, it's a culture-making industry. Now I'd like to turn our attention to fan culture. What is fan culture? We often think, I'm a big fan. I've already told you I'm a big fan of the Rolling Stones. I belong to a couple Rolling Stones groups. I'm also a fan of WESS Radio. That's the radio station here at East Stroudsburg University that I advise. I belong to that group. You have a lot of groups that you belong to. Do you think of yourself as a fan? Or do you think of yourself as a political community? Do you think of yourself after reading this chapter as part of a fascist mob? Because that's what the fan culture section in this chapter is all about. It's trying to discuss at what point do fans start to stop membership by other people. I can tell you the Rolling Stones, they're really old guys by by your standards are in their 70s. I've been following them since I was a young teenager, 16 years old. So they mean a lot to me. And you might have a band like that in your lifetime as well that lasts that long. And they're on tour right now, going around on tour. And I watched the comments that are coming out about their latest concert in New Orleans. And somebody put on Facebook that Keith seemed to lose his place in a song. Keith is a guitarist and he lost his place during a song Midnight Rambler. Everybody jumped on this guy. Oh, no, he didn't. He was just fine-tuning. Keith always makes his way back into the song. The defense of Keith Richards against this one person's is exactly what we're talking about here when we're talking about the power of fan culture turning into a kind of fascist structure, shouting down that person who maybe made a legitimate compliment. And that's just a mild example. It can go a lot further when people start defriending others and deleting and all that stuff. At what point does the fan base move into a political organization where you're trying to get activity and get movement and exercise power and move into fascism? That's for you to answer. Now let's move on to the idea that social media is also social media capitalism. That capitalism is a word that we should always have on the forefront of our minds. Social media are moneymakers. Social media are capitalism. There are lots of people aspiring to never work in an office a single day to want to make their entire livelihood on social media. We've already talked about the term prosumption. That's consumption as production. But consider this, that social media are both a space of participation and commodification. So you're both participating, you're jumping on, you're thinking you're connecting with friends, you're seeing where somebody is in their summer, out at what beach, you're getting in touch with a high school person that you haven't seen in a while, but you're also in a space where commodification is taking place. All your activity is being put into the big data picture. Some of your friends, like a Jessica, are also selling stuff that they may be open to you buying stuff, and you may be open to buying stuff from that. Commodification is going on in there. All right, now we're going to wrap up by talking about Henry Jenkins and digital labor. We have identified this idea a couple times in this class, but we haven't really given a great example. We talked about the Huffington Post, which most of you are probably not that familiar with, where you do have people who are famous actors like Alec Baldwin, for example, the actor. He'll post on Huffington Post. He's doing it for free. But basically, the people who are writing for HuffPost are doing it for free, while HuffPost is selling advertising on the site, making a lot of money. It's basically illustrating the point that companies are profiting from audience labor for free. And we can really see this in video gaming, where video gaming today is played widely by males and females. Most of the students in my class, 80%, are familiar with a wide range of video gaming platforms and versions. It's amazing to me. And the idea there is that work feels like play when you're into a digital labor marketplace. And that's what Spreadable Media, Henry Jenkins' book, talks about a lot, is that people are voluntarily giving up their labor for free. They're choosing to help sell a video game by all the communicating they do about those video gaming products, even outside of video gaming in and of itself, and they're not benefiting. And Fuchs thinks that that's incorrect. Jenkins came back to that critique, and he said, he underestimated that there are barriers to getting into social media. There are barriers of financial barriers, there are barriers of race, there are barriers of ethnicity, there are barriers of religion. There are barriers, and that he backpedaled on some of his earlier assertions about how participatory social media really is. And then finally, for the video lecture today, Nico Carpenter is a person I want to introduce. He responded to Jenkins, and he's saying, a lot of people, in essence, are presenting themselves as engaging in a participatory culture on social media, but it's really like calling a simple museum visit a participation in culture. Just going to the museum for half an hour is not participating. Just lurking on social media is not participating. Just liking something every once in a while is not participating. And the opposite of that is true as well. Just talking about yourself all the time on social media is not participating. So in the end, are all platforms of social media, are they participatory? That's for you to decide. Have a great day.